And again, we can make this more conversationally as well as we go through the slides, as Rachel kind of talks about the work, the amazing work she's doing in Shawnee, Potawatomi County. Feel free to ask questions. Feel free to, let's just make this conversational. Should we just get started, you think? If you're
Works
ready?
for me.
All right. Again, what we want to do is I was trying to think about this presentation and kind of how to put something together in a panel. What Rachel and I talked about is maybe just kind of starting off by walking through kind of how we got started in Shawnee. What is our process for what we do with Blue Zones before we even start kind of hitting the ground running. And then I was going to hand it over to Rachel to just really kind of talk about the work that they're doing, give you some information on that. I think you guys know me. My name is Nick Buetner. I'm the Community and Corporate Program Director for Blue Zone Project. I actually travel the country working with all 42 of our communities around the country in kind of the implementation of our program. And Rachel, might have you introduce yourself?
Sure. So I'm Rachel Milo. I live in Shawnee, Oklahoma. I am born and bred Oklahoman. I am the daughter of a cattle farmer. So I grew up probably eating the exact same thing most of you did and working outside as many of you did as well. So I understand our cultural challenges to changing our way in this almost third time, right? How we grew up and how we live and then how we know we should live. I am the community director at Blue Zones Project Potawatomi County in Shawnee. I have a staff of 5 people. And while I have not traveled to all of the Blue Zones, I actually spent the last almost 10 years commuting back and forth to New York City for my day job, and noticed what a difference a community is that revolves around walking versus driving. And so one of the really interesting things I think that comes from Blue Zones Project is really how we think about our community and the connectivity and how we move people, not just cars. And so we'll talk a little bit about that because it's also maybe where we even see some of our greatest challenges right here, because I personally would feel extremely guilty. I would go to New York City and I would work for 4 days and I would eat so well and I would walk miles and miles and miles, and then as soon as I got in the car at the airport, I never needed my tennis shoes again. I was back to 4-inch heels and getting in my car and out of my car and never really taking more than 25 steps at any given time, right? And sitting at a desk. And then I would feel all the guilt of it, right? So a lot of what the Blue Zones Project does for us is really take some of that burden off of us as individuals and personally, and puts the impact on the environment, so that like when I was in the big city or like when I was in those communities, the healthy choice was actually easier. And so a lot of what we're going to talk about and what he talks about the research to support is when we look at this for our community, it is only successful, people only buy in if the healthy choice is easier, cheaper, easier, right? More glamorous. And so we really have to look at all of those things as well. So I will talk to you a little bit about all the things we're doing in Potawatomi County. I'll talk about the challenges. I'll talk about the wins, which I think are also super important. And then hopefully what you'll be able to watch in the press is also the results that we'll see from all the work we're doing. So.
So a little bit about how we got started in Shawnee. The Avitas Foundation, they had a hospital system, and tell me if I get this wrong, that was bought out. They created a nonprofit from the money from the hospital system, and they were working around community health. They were working on the same principles that aligned with Blue Zones. And Michelle, the person who's running that foundation, my brother Tony, got connected, started talking, learned more about Blue Zones, and said, I think this is going to fit really well with kind of what we do with Blue Zones. and became kind of the sponsoring partner in the community for Blue Zone Project. Again, what we try to do with Blue Zone Project is what Rachel said a lot more eloquently than I think I did, is how do you change the environment to make that healthy choice easier? What we've done for the last, the way our medical system works here in America is you wait till you get sick, you go to the doctor says, here's a pill, or it might have to be surgery or something invasive, might tell you, hey, you need to shed a couple pounds or exercise more. Then they try to do these things. The problem is, if you ever tried to diet, if you've ever tried to exercise, run a marathon, it's hard for us to do that as individuals. So what we're trying to kind of look at is if you can get to the problems that are leading to diabetes and heart disease 10 years before you have it, to change the community where people are just automatically healthier, healthcare costs go down, productivity goes up into the community, and you can do that by changing the life radius, by changing the way, looking to make it easier for us to eat healthier, make it easier for us to exercise and walk more, make it easier for us to create stronger social supportive networks in our communities, and look at stress and purpose. So that's kind of the heart of the life radius and kind of what we do. Our program is kind of split up into 3 different areas. What we start off with is discovery and planning, where we bring a team down. No two communities are alike. No, they're not. They still all have the same problems. I don't think you're going to find a community that's solved smoking, that's solved heart disease, that's solved diabetes. They all have problems, but they all interact in slightly different ways. So what we try to do first is to come down and do some community research, really try to understand kind of what is happening in the communities, what's the strengths, what's the challenges, and what's the opportunities in a community before we even start our work. The discovery process for us kind of starts off with doing homework beforehand, reading a ton of documents, really kind of jumping into really trying to understand the city census data, Robert Wood Johnson Foundation data, meeting with the local health people. So again, you understand what are the strengths, challenges, and weaknesses in the community. And then you have to engage the leadership in the community in all the different sectors that I talked about earlier. And talk to them, learn about what are their challenges, what do they want for a healthy community, where do they want to go. And I'm going to ask Rachel to talk about this a little bit more, but you can't be successful. There's a lot of things happening in your community that's good. I can tell you that right now without ever being in your community. I know there's strengths and good things happening, but the problem is they tend to be happening in isolation. But if you can break down and build all the champions in the community, the heads of your largest work sites, your restaurants, your schools, your faith-based partners, if you can get your city leaders to really kind of understand this direction and the benefits so that everybody's charging together, that's how you create sustainable movement. Now, when you think about elected officials, this is where you're asking me earlier on the challenging is I think across the country that's one of the things that's more challenging. Because think about it, when I was a kid, I grew up in that era when I got on a plane, there was a huge cloud of smoke over my head when I walked down that aisle. Because people could smoke on planes. It was okay to smoke on planes. And finally some guy stood up and said, wait a minute. Secondhand smoke kills. This kills. We got to outlaw this for the right reasons. And he stood up and he did that. And he created policy. And there was backlash on it. But he did it for that. And then that moved into, people smoked inside of the terminal. And finally it pushed people out of the terminal for smoking. And then it looked at restaurants and other things like that for how it's done. Now, it's challenging because in some ways the argument is they've taken away my freedoms, you're taking away my rights. But if you look at the healthcare costs, if you look at smoking rates in this country, once it started over about 35, 40 years ago, the average, about 40-some% of average adults smoked, and then the national average is now between 15 and 20%. Now, what's that impact on healthcare costs? What's that impact on the community? And they did it because there was a champion from the community that stood up and said, yeah, this is important. So I'm not saying smoking it has to work within your thing, but you need that strong leadership that's willing to sometimes make decisions that might not be 100% positive or popular with your community, if that makes sense. And that's kind of one of the challenges. But if you have all these other people walking lockstep with you, now it becomes a little bit easier, right? So we engage the leadership. We come in with a team of people over those months, and we listen to your community, people of all ages. What do you like about your community? What are those things that are important to you around your community? Again, strengths, challenges, and opportunities. We bring in national experts around the built environment. Dan Burton's worked with about 4,000 communities. Maggie Adamek has been doing food policy work for years. Not to come in and tell you this is what you do, but understand where are the biggest opportunities around health, where are the biggest opportunities around you, around your built environment, and food policy. And then how do you manage what you can't measure? So we've partnered with Gallup and ShareCare to use the well-being index. This is developed back in, I think, 2005, if I'm not mistaken, to really try to accurately measure 5 areas of your health: your purpose, social, your financial, your community, how does your community impact your health, and your physical health. What Gallup does is they're doing about 2,000 calls
Yes.
a day.
Correct.
That they've been doing every day, including holidays, since 2005 to create one of the biggest databases. And then every year they publish this data. What I love about this is this was actually vetted by the WHO and can actively predict onset of disease in the community before that community has disease. So for us, it's an important tool because we can look and see where there's opportunities by using tools like this beforehand. And then from there, we develop what we call the Discovery Report, which again kind of lays out here are the strengths, challenges, and opportunities. Around the same time, we bring in a steering committee of leaders in the community. The steering committee tends to be the influencers. They tend to be those people that can really kind of help. We look at putting in a leadership team in each of our sectors. They're usually made up of the co-chairs to all these ones below. But this is a community-led initiative. This isn't Blue Zone Project coming in and changing it. What we try to do, bless you by the way, is pass over the ownership of the work to the community so that you guys are helping define the strategies. You're helping define the techniques and how we're implementing this. And the benefit of this is after the Blue Zone Project, when we leave, you have the tools that you need in order to do it. We hire a local team versus us coming in and telling you this is what you need to do. We have a local team that is set up, that's hired, that have the relationships, they have the trust in the community, and again, they own the work. And the nice part again is they're assets that the community has afterwards in terms of the work we do. And we tend to office in a really good downtown place, so again, you're part of the community where people can come in, learn more about Blue Zone Project in a lot of different, very easily. Again, this process, yeah, I do want to mention this piece too. What the Blue Zone, what the policy charrettes are, it mentioned earlier how the food expert and built environment expert comes to town. What we do is we pull together the stakeholders in your town and we hold what's called a charrette. What it is basically Dan or Meg saying, in the months of research, these are what you learned are your biggest opportunities around food policy, around built environment. But you, the community, your community says, yeah, this is what we want to do, or no, this one's not right for us, our community's not ready. And they select, your community selects the priorities that they want to be with our national vision, giving you some guidance. And again, Rachel, I think, can talk a little bit more about this process, if that makes sense. But all this kind of bleeds into what we call the blueprint. And that is the plan for implementation. We update it every year, but it's a 3 to 5 year plan. in the community for how we're going to have impact. So probably a little bit more time than I want to spend on that, but that is the kind of our discovery process, kind of high level. Yeah, and I don't know if you guys have any questions or if we can hand it over to Rachel.
I'm going to skip back to the committee structure. So when we talk about Potawatomi County specifically, let me tell you who this is, right? So let me put some faces in these boxes for you. So when Blue Zones Project comes to town and you have a funding sponsor, right? So our funding is Avitas Foundation, as he mentioned, which was established as a result of selling the hospital. Avitas Foundation underwrites our work and the local team, if you will, right? They're the underwriter, but we work actually for Blue Zones Project. Now what that means is that then we have all of the back end support, marketing, technology, expertise, etc. in all of these categories behind us. So none of us actually have to come to the table as an expert, right? So I don't have to come to the table as a built environment expert. I don't have to come to the table as a food policy expert. Any expertise that I have in those areas are a bonus to this local staff. What I have, and I actually bring them, is the network, right? So I know my city manager by first name and his wife, Katie, right? I know their children, or I've hung out at the pool with them. I know the people in our community. So I'm the director of the program with 4 people on my staff. Each of them have a particular network and a role within our community. When we look at this committee structure, this is really the largest determinant of your success in creating a Blue Zones project. And that is who raises their hand and says, yes, I am very interested in making our community and our environment healthier. When Blue Zones Project came to Shawnee to interview our committee, to interview our community to see if we were ready, more people showed up to the initial questioning phase and the Q&A focus groups than they've had in any other community ever before. That's a testament to the fact of, 1, we were ready, right? We got the word out. And 2, we had leadership positions across the whole community interested in doing so. Now, it's really easy for somebody to show up at a focus group, sit around and complain or talk about what's great and talk about what sucks. And it's a whole different thing to commit to a steering committee meeting, maybe 4 hours a week for the next 12 weeks. That's about what these people put in. So in my steering committee, it's the CEO of the hospital, the president of both universities, the superintendent of schools, at least one other superintendent. It's a manufacturing plant owner. It is foundation owners. It's my city manager. So when you think about the people who are participating, we need them in all the places around the community, and they're investing very significant time. And that's their ask at the beginning, is very significant time. They're also leveraging all of their network to create our leadership team. The leadership team, so if you think about it even in status, if you will, our steering committee are the figureheads and the network and the ability to say go. The leadership committee, the leadership team, these are the goers, right? So then this is the vice president at the bank. This is the vice president at Gordon Cooper Technology Center. This is the PR at the hospital. These are the people who then are going to go and do the work. What does this leadership committee do? They volunteer to take one of these subcommittees as their committee, right? So when we talk about, I'm going to come back to policy, but the schools committee. So we have the superintendent of the vocational education program as a co-chair, and someone from Oklahoma Baptist University as the co-chairs of education. They not only commit to do the work, but then they also recruit a committee to do the work. So then they're having subcommittees. Then those subcommittees members are all taking so many schools that they will then be the liaison. So they'll own a school, right? So now when you think about it, I have a steering 1 or 2, leadership 1 or 2, a committee of 8. That's about 12 people just to get me to the one schools committee. So now you multiply that out. We have almost 80 people just in this structure.
Now, is this the city of Shawnee or is it all of Potawatomi County?
Yes. So.
Does that answer your question?
So that's a great question. So we are Blue Zones Project of Potawatomi County because
Right.
that is Avitas's mission, Potawatomi County, globally, if you will. The scope of our first 3 years is to focus on creating the tipping point of the greater Shawnee area, feeling like if we do that, we're impacting the whole county. And the reason that I say that, for example, we know that the greater Shawnee, so technically Shawnee by census is about 32,000 people. Our target is including 44,000 people. So it's the greater Shawnee, but it doesn't actually pull in Tecumseh. But we also know that the food culture of Tecumseh is largely impacted by Shawnee. So if we can reach the tipping point in Shawnee, we will have an impact. And then we look at sustainability efforts and second phases, third phases, et cetera. And I think the vision of Avitas is that that continues to expand from there.
Okay,
Answer your question?
thank you.
Yes, and so the county has certain access to resources within the website, but what they don't necessarily get is my staff full attention. And so when you look at this, when you think about, okay, so how do I do this in my community? In Discovery, before we even write the blueprint, we had almost a full 100 people involved at some level, giving their time and their effort. And we haven't done anything in the public yet. Nobody's gotten a pat on the back. Nobody's gotten an atta girl. Nobody's gotten any, all they've gotten is a lot of meeting time, right? And research and learning and digging and understanding who we are as a community, what we can do, and then understanding the research that supports the Blue Zones Project story, right? Which is, here's research to say, this is why you're doing these things. So that when you do have that first adversarial conversation, you're armed with research and data, not just it's popular or it's cool or it's the new thing. The research and the data from the Gallup study, which not only does Gallup do this national surveying, but if your community is chosen and you engage in this partnership, they then do an oversampling study just of your target audience. So in April, they also then surveyed an additional 750 people, I believe, just in Potawatomi County to ask them. It was a really long survey, several pages, right? For us to better understand our data specifically at a time and place right now in our county. And it was all aspects of well-being. And so one of the things I want to remind everybody to do is on this side of the sheet, when you look at the 9 power principles, is don't get caught on just eating or just walking. When we're talking about the well-being of Potawatomi County, I'm also training facilitators for purpose workshops so that we can then lead purpose workshops for rooms just like this so that you can name and identify the gifts that you have and understand if you are using them or can use them in the environment in which you function today. I'm hosting a purpose workshop actually on Sunday, and I'm doing it actually semi-privately. It was just 25 seats, and it's almost everyone in the age between 60 and 80 who in the last 5 years have either been divorced or lost their spouse. Tough time, right? That's a huge part of our well-being. It is just as important to our overall well-being and our longevity as each of the other 8 things. So when we look at this and we look at the involvement, we're looking so broad as far as all of these things that really contribute to our longevity, that the one thing I would challenge you to do is not get caught on just eating less or differently and just on moving more. They're important, but there's so much more. So when we talk about our faith-based committee, right? So when you think about faith-based, you're like, oh, well, that's a given. Faith-based wants you to be healthy and they want you to live a long time. That's a given. And they want you to know your purpose. And honestly, it's maybe the toughest sector that Blue Zones Project has across the country. They're almost always the very last ones to adopt and the most hesitant. Not in part because there's any conflicting message, but there's a fear that you're going to try to trump my message, which is of the gospel, right? Or of whatever our message is. And so that one is the first challenge, is to overcome that. But if you're in the state of Oklahoma, you understand that faith-based organizations have a huge impact on our food culture. So, what are we feeding kids on Sunday night at youth group? What are we, pizza? I mean, I was a youth director for 7 years. Pretty sure I ate pizza every Sunday night for about 7 years. What are we having Sunday after brunch, right? What are we having Wednesday night? And so when we talk about faith-based organizations, we have on that committee, we have the president of a faith-based elementary school through senior school church. And then we also have somebody who leads the Family Promise in our area. So those are the two co-chairs. So they're working through our faith-based organizations to get at least 10 of our 20 largest faith-based organizations to commit to improving the well-being of their community, of their congregation, of their membership. And you know what? It's really been an amazing kind of movement towards this. But we know that the faith-based organization, if we are actively involved in it, it's impacting not only our spiritual life, but it's also impacting our food, it's impacting our overall well-being and our understanding. And we would think in the state of Oklahoma, with a church every rock's throw, that everybody would know their purpose. And honestly, we've been the community that's been the most adoptive of purpose workshops. It's really been fabulous, just really amazing. So when you look at this, your first 100 people, right? That's part of it. And then together, we start writing this blueprint. Just gonna take a second here. When I say writing a blueprint for an organization, what vision comes to mind?
Like a master plan.
Yeah.
Strategic.
A couple of pages, like a brochure, like 100 pages, like a binder, like a book. Okay, I always bring this for show and tell because somewhere around here. Oh yeah. I bring this for show and tell because when we got our blueprint and it looked something like this, and this is the work of those 100 people and the experts that came to town. It really is a blueprint. And then the next phase of that is each one of these committees then write out their implementation plan for the next year. So now committee co-chairs have not only the blueprint for the destination as to where we're headed, but now they also have an implementation plan that they can follow month by month, milestone by milestone, guide by guide. So now food policy, for example, has certain objectives that they want to meet. And in those objectives, to change cultural norms around healthy eating, increase access to healthy food, decrease prevalence of unhealthy food, and build healthy food infrastructure as the 4 big ideas, then Maggie Adamek, our expert, says, well, how do I do that? And then she writes out this is how you do that. Here's the policies you need in place. Here are the ideas for doing that. Here are some best practices from around the country. And oh, by the way, if you need any materials to support that, if you need it written, if you need the documentation, if you need the testimonials, I've got all of that. So now I'm leading groups that we are retooling, refreshing, and rebuilding community gardens in our community. Not because we didn't have them, but because we have a whole lot of community gardeners who have really great desire to teach people how to garden, and they put it in the ground, and then school lets out, and all the vegetables die on the vine. So it's what was happening in our community. Everybody would plant it and nobody was harvesting it, which then leads to deeper underground understandings of your community, which is, why is that? Not one, always because they don't care, but secondly, because I walk up and I have no idea what that thing is that's growing. And I took that carrot out of the ground, it doesn't look like the one at the grocery store that's really bright and shiny and clean. And so now you start layering that with your school policy. You start connecting that with your volunteers and your cooking demo people and your farmers market. And so in Potawatomi County, what we've been able to do is now we're connecting with a community renewal group. We're putting in community gardens in our neighborhoods that need it the most through their efforts and their understanding, tying it with education programs in the school, tying it with education learning at their local community center, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But that's not the local team of 5. That's that first 100 that is now a little over 1,000 people that are engaged in the program. We did the kickoff in August. which in theory, the kickoff then takes us into implementation, because Potawatomi people and Shawnee people and Oklahoma people are just only a tad bit competitive. We want to be doing everything first. So everyone has started their implementation planning because I want to be the first hospital approved, I want to be the first school approved, I want to be the first restaurant approved, and we've got this really race to the front. So we really kick off in this implementation plan. But it is no easy feat, I tell you. Because in people, we're looking at the individual, right? Because we know we all have an individual heart for it, but what we've heard over and over is that the environment will make that choice easy for us. But we are asking people to individually say, you know what, I'll try a couple of those things. I'll downsize my plates. I may adopt a dog, because those who adopt a dog on average get an extra mile and a half of exercise a day if they own a dog. Oh, it's advocate, right? Discover your purpose. So that's the purpose workshops. Volunteering. We are not running a volunteer agency, but we're partnering with everyone in town. So that if you do attend a purpose workshop, and as your gift, you grow things, and grow things to this person may be their mentorship with young children, and they're always growing young people, right, into grown-ups. And then this other one is planting seeds, right? Well, we could connect both of them with organizations that will let them use their gifts, right? And so if they know their purpose and they're using those, we can add up to 7 years to your life because you know why you get up in the morning. Social networks, the walking Moai groups. So this is very interesting. I think it's scary to Oklahomans that we're going to put you all in a group and say, you know, you guys raise your hands on similar activities. So what we're going to do is we're going to put you guys in a group and you're going to walk once a week. You guys pick your name, pick your style, pick your location, walk once a week for 10 weeks, send me a report. And you're like, who is this person, right? But you know what we found is that 6 to 7 of them will remain friends after that, and now we've just built your network. And you become lifelong friends. And again, to the Framingham study, we know that isolation kills. So if we can connect you with people that then you find common interests with and you'll spend time with, and you can speak with, you can live longer, right? So from a people standpoint, and then we look at places. When we look at the places and we think about who's involved, grocery stores, we need 2 of our local grocery stores to implement that Blue Zones lane, to start advertising and promoting fresh produce, to providing local grown, et cetera, et cetera. Grocery stores, restaurants, schools, employers, and faith-based organizations. So we're looking at 2 grocery stores, 10 restaurants, 6 of our local schools, because we have 11 or 12, 10 of our top 20 work sites, and then 10 of our top 20 faith-based organizations. So now think about the number of people that we're impacting. If all of them at every one of those locations have the ability to do standing meetings, they have the ability to a downshifting room as part of policy, breaks, or monitors that say, hey, get up once in a while and exercise. It's really good for your health. And productivity goes up if you're not sitting for 7 straight hours.
Or what about getting all the work sites together to then start sharing ideas and their successes and how and why they're doing it?
Yeah. And the work sites can launch Moai groups. And you know, we found in one of the manufacturing plants in one of our other communities that the manufacturing plant launched a walking Moai in which they had labeled around the factory, you know, the 1/4 mile track. And suddenly now I'm on a walking Moai. I'm a yellow hat and I'm doing it with the corner office guy. And suddenly we have a different relationship because we spent 10 weeks walking for 30 minutes together. Makes a big difference on company culture too, right? The third area in which Blue Zones Project focuses the pledge process is policy. So many of you are involved in policy in some aspect of your job, right? And so we look at built environment, food policy, and tobacco policy. So raise your hand if the most interesting to you is built environment. Raise your hand if it's food policy. Raise your hand if it's tobacco policy. So it's fairly evenly distributed. But let's talk about food policy. That got the most hands. Food policy is so hard in the state of Oklahoma. I'm not gonna lie. It is really hard. So our mayor is highly involved And when he watches this, he won't get on to me because he knows this to be true. But my mayor will openly say, I will do anything you want as it relates to smoking. If you want to smoke in my city, I'll buy you a bus to get out. Like, that's how strong he feels, right? Like, he's like, I'll do anything to stop smoking. But he's so against stopping any free enterprise that he's like, nope, I'm not going to tell anybody they can't have their restaurant here. I'm not going to tell anybody they can't serve this food here, right? So this huge just paradigm shift between understanding that bad food is bad food, just as bad cigarettes and bad nicotine are bad nicotine, right? And so I have him on tobacco policy, and I don't let him come to food policy because we can't sometimes get over that, right, of the free enterprise, of the idea. But what we're learning from a lot of other communities is we can pass ordinances to protect ourselves. So anybody here from Owasso? So you may have seen in the news, Owasso just passed an ordinance not allowing the Dollar Generals into neighborhoods anymore unless they have the market. So what we know in our community is that our children who live in the toughest neighborhood are eating most all of their dinners at the Love's convenience store because it's the closest thing. A couple other blocks, it's a Dollar General, but Love's gets to be picked on today. For them, they're eating at the convenience store, and they're making the food decisions for their whole family at the convenience store each evening. And so what can we do from the built environment standpoint, which is, let's not be so married to C1 and R1 and C2 and say that these are houses so you can't have commercial. It's all residential so you can't have a pocket grocery store anymore. Let's get away from that and say, no, what does this community need? And maybe they want a community garden as they've raised their hand and said, we'd really like a community garden if you teach us how to use it. But the other thing they want is like, hey, I'd really like my child to be able to walk on a safe sidewalk about 5 blocks to somewhere that they could buy food that we should be eating, not just the fried burrito at the checkout counter where I can use my WIC card or my SNAP. And so we have to look at all the policy to impact food policy. But we started with step number 1, based on the recommendation from Maggie Adamick, which is our food expert from Minneapolis. She suggested that we start first with creating a multi-jurisdictional food policy council. And so what we did is we actually, one of our subcommittees of food policy, because now food policy has 5 subcommittees, because the work is so great. So this committee, they were going to meet 3 times, and in those 3 meetings, they would write the blueprint for a multi-jurisdictional food policy council. They would agree on it, and then they would take it to the city commission for approval. They had 3 meetings. That was our objective. We met twice, we put it together, and our 3rd meeting was at a city council meeting on a Monday night. Of course, all the other things that it takes to pass policy was done in the background. And we presented to our city commission a food policy council that they would support recommendations and advice from a multi-jurisdictional food policy council established by a group of predetermined 20 to 25 people, by including at least 1 farmer, at least 1 grower, at least 1 county appointed person, at least up to 1 person per government within our county. So they approved this because in my county there's also Earlsboro and Maud and Tecumseh and Shawnee and all of these other, the 4 tribes that all have governments. So now we take that multi-jurisdictional policy approved by Shawnee and we're taking it to every single one of those government entities for approval, so that by January 1st of 18, I've actually stood up a policy team, a food policy council, whose sheer focus is to think about our food policy and to think about what we're allowing and not allowing into our county. And it's made up of all of the people.
So Shawnee passed the policy?
We did. They passed a resolution of support for the food council. And so now we'll stand up the food council, and they've approved that. And then that food policy council will make recommendations to the city commission. Earlsboro also passed it, and McLeod. And then I'm working on the Citizen Potawatomi Nation agreeing to some very similar entity.
So are there actual policy bits in there, or is this saying we support you looking into making a policy? I'm making sure I understood.
Yeah, sure. So this is baby step one.
Oh, yeah, I
Right.
know baby steps.
So baby step one is we'll support
Uh-huh.
the creation of a council with the objectives of this. And so then we wrote their objectives of increase healthy food options, build a healthy infrastructure, right from our blueprint, and said, this is what this council will do. Upon agreement of these entities, that group will then write their bylaws for annual review by the city, or to be reviewed by the city at least annually.
Okay.
Yep, makes sense?
And to your point, she just did is created a food policy group that now that you have that information, you have enough people that are pushing things along, now you can choose what are the policies that you want to try to enact, and you start moving it downhill. It's step by step,
And,
baby steps.
yeah.
And then the other entities in the county are passing something similar that says they too will form, or they will join and be a part of the first?
Yeah, so they're actually passing the exact same resolution of support of the exact same jurisdictional policy council, and saying, we too will support policies brought to us through this council. And so it's a resolution of support. And basically when you really think about it as a city government official, they're like, okay, so similar to having a planning commission, similarly to having a beautification committee, similar to having all of these, I think we have the public library committee, council. So basically it's somebody who will filter through all of the ideas and suggestions and recommendations. That's the city's version, which is like, thank you. Just take all the farmers market and community gardens and just you guys figure it out and then tell us what's best for us, right? So they can use that for that. The second piece of that then from the other side is like, oh goody, now we have a filtering mechanism, right? So which is, I've got this really brilliant idea to pass an ordinance against Dollar Generals in neighborhoods if they don't also bring their market component. And if I'll take it through the policy council, the city has said, we support a food policy council to be basically the recommending body. Now I have a much better chance, even if my commission turns over every year, right? Because the commission can check, the whole thing can turn in 2 years. So now we have this food policy council where they can serve, and we set up their terms to not exactly succinct with commissions, but basically we set it up where it staggers, but they can serve up to like 4 years, I think, so that we can create some sort of endurance. And you know what? That policy was from resources that our expert gave us, and we were able to customize it, make it Shawneed, and then once we make it Shawneed, I then take it back to her and go, okay, is there anything in here that I don't even know, that I don't know, that I'm setting us up for failure, right? And so then we get that stamp of approval, send it back through, and then that's where we are on that. Cool, huh? Yeah. So food policy, what we're doing is looking at those 4 areas, and we also just had our very first downtown farmers market, organized farmers market. We have a farmers market that's kind of our county farmers market, but it's out of town. So, and it's been around a long time, it's great. There's no desire to compete with that. That's a Saturday morning. But the desire of the food policy committee is to increase access to fruit and vegetables on every edge of town. So we start with downtown. We tie it to an event that's already happening every month. We have Third Fridays on our downtown. On the third Friday, the businesses stay open later. We set up the farmers market so that we can give our vendors every opportunity to be successful, right? Because there's a built-in audience. Past that zoning ordinance, if you will, that we can allow that. Got Bo Carter from the State Health Department sits on this committee for me. A Department of Agriculture representative sits on these committees with me. And you know what? I find that a lot of the health department, the Department of Ag, the people who have to sign off on this stuff, if you'll bring them in sooner, then they'll help you stay out of the trouble, right? And so they've been fabulous to work with in that sense because they kind of helped us build it to prevent our own mistakes. The next step is to do one in Midtown during the week And the next step is to do one on Northtown at the mall area one night a week. And so each one of them have their own set of rules, but it's all about increased fruits and vegetables. And so Food Policy Council is attacking community gardens, farmers market, and then we're looking at things like soda taxes. We're looking at things like zoning ordinances. But what can we do to change this culture? And then youth-led summits. Our food policy group was very interested in the youth component. Any other questions on food policy?
Have you looked at in terms of zoning, have you looked at that legally yet? As to how you would go about keeping things out that want to come in?
Mm-hmm.
And what have you found?
A lot of communities do it, actually.
Have there been any tests of that in court that you're aware of?
You'd probably be able to speak to that better than I, but
None that I know. I mean, part of our pledge is basically being able to pass ordinances around. Can you build a convenience or fast food restaurant right next to a school? You know, you're creating those zones. In all the communities that we've worked with, we've never, because you create that infrastructure and the policy change at the local, at the government entity, we haven't had lawsuits in the past that I know about it on anything.
So far it's worked pretty good.
Yeah.
and really this is a concept that's new to us, but it's not new anywhere else. It's almost,
Right.
it's really no different than zoning. You can only have one vape shop within every 5 miles, or one liquor store within so many miles of a school, or this or that. I mean, the process is at the city level, and they have the right to do that. It's new to us because maybe our city, like your city, is like, oh, we don't care, just come here, just come,
Yeah.
whoever you are, right? And at some point we have to go, but if you get here, you make us worse. So go next door.
And again, I don't know what your local ordinances are and stuff like that. It's part of the reason that we do that summit out of the gate, or those charrettes, is because then we can go in and really understand the laws, we can understand that we can pull together the leadership, and we can talk about what policies do we want to do, and then what are the risks with doing those policies. Is it really what we want to do? Is it going to be able to be passed in your community? What's the political capital that's going to be used for doing some of these things? And we can really kind of take a really comprehensive approach, and like she was talking about with food policy, how do you also build up, get those early wins, and create the infrastructure that you need in order to get those ones that are a little bit more challenging for your community passed.
And I might tell you, your city's doing it already.
Sure they are.
They're just not calling it a convenience store, or they're just not calling it a fast food, or they're just not calling it this. But what I found as soon as I dig in is that our policy was completely written to make those boundaries happen based on whatever the desired,
It's a zoning ordinance.
whatever the desired zoning was of that era. So in the 70s, when we went to commercial one versus residential one, there was a reason they were zoning commercial out of residential for a very specific reason. It may at that time had something largely to do because they didn't want highways running through their neighborhoods. Well, they didn't zone no highways through the neighborhoods. They zoned no commercial in this area. Does that make sense? So what I would tell you is that through the backing and the support of them, they can tell me all of the ways it's been worded in other communities to do exactly what I need to do, and nobody knew the difference. So tobacco policy, for example, as a result of our summit, so Rich Killingsworth is our tobacco expert, and we talked about zoning against the tobacco drive-through smoke shops, okay? Shawnee has 117 restaurants. I'm kind of thinking like 97 of them are drive-through fast foods because we're right on I-40, right? And so the conversation went hand in hand as we were talking about food policy, and then a few weeks later I'm with the tobacco expert, and he said, yeah, you've got preemption, but you don't have any regulation against zoning for no future drive-throughs. You're at capacity on drive-throughs. Okay, well, that smoke shop up the road from me probably wouldn't do nearly the business they do if you couldn't drive through. Or the woman who's sitting in the room said, I might not drink as much Diet Coke if I couldn't drive through and get it. If I had to get out of my car to go get it, I'd probably drink a lot less.
I can see if you're saying prohibiting categories of things like drive-through restaurants, but the one example that you brought up in Owasso,
Mhm.
are they specifically targeting Dollar General? Because I could see that being a legal issue for them in terms
Yeah.
of.
I'd have them pull it for you, but I think it has something to do with corner stores that don't offer a certain percentage of fruits and vegetables in the produce,
I get
et
it.
cetera, et cetera.
That would,
But it was,
that's where I got off
yeah.
track.
Yeah. No, it's a
They're
good
wording
question.
it differently, but the goal 100% for them was say, Dollar General, quit cannibalizing my poorest people. Yes, ma'am.
Quick question, with you being first in Oklahoma and the way our state sales tax is set up.
Yes.
Have you run into any issues with city council, or well, obviously not because you're moving forward, but was that a tough sell at first? If you're talking about limiting fast food restaurants, and I know many of us live in communities where, yay, we just got a Chick-fil-A, yay, we just got a new Whataburger. I mean, in our communities like that,
Yeah.
because sales tax is generated and that's how our communities operate.
Sure, absolutely.
So what is your response to that? I mean,
So-
I know the longer term health benefits outweigh those, but if you're working with communities who are kind of short-sighted,
Mhm.
as
Which
far
most
as,
of ours are. Yeah.
yes, as far as needing that immediate revenue in
Yeah.
our pockets,
Yeah.
how do you justify that?
So our first message to a community is like, hey, you're gonna stop allowing fast food restaurants. So first of all, that's not the message. The message is we're gonna increase fruits and vegetables. That's what we're gonna do. Our message is not to eliminate them, but we're going to increase fruits and vegetables. And we're gonna make it so easy for you to get fruits and vegetables into your plate, the people will make that decision for you. The people will make that decision once you give them access to healthy food easily.
And the other piece that I end up working with sometimes with communities is the economic value. It's great to be able to bring those in there, but what does that mean for the people that are living in that community? Is it a place where people really want to move, really want to come? If you look at Oklahoma City right now, they are focusing on some healthy stuff, and they're seeing economic benefit to that as a community. And it's one of the initial conversations that I had with Shawnee was they saw that economic benefit, and that's the people that they want to try to move there, because now you get a healthier workforce, you get a healthier X, Y, and Z. So I work with a guy named Joe Mancosi that actually does that economic case. He goes in and really looks at the economic value that then he can go in and present to the city council, the leadership and stuff, and say, here's the economic argument as to why you might want to think about that. So you're also educating, right, around it. And again, communities can make up their own mind. It's not our job to tell them what policies to choose from. We're just asking them to do a certain number of policies that they select through our process.
And everybody will buy in, and 2 months later, you'll have the exact same argument again. I mean, it's part of the process,
Yeah.
right? It just is. And so you'll represent the value again in 2 months. And so it's not all easy and rosy, but here's what I'll also tell you. Because of the way the structure is set up and that there is a funding source for our program from beginning to end, your officials and people are very willing to work with you when they know you're not going to ask them for any money to fund you. It helps a lot. So the greatest thing I can tell you is if this is really important to you and you think it's great, get buy-in from the funding source in your community. So who is that? Is that a foundation? Is it a not-for-profit? Is it a healthcare? So Blue Zones Project in almost every community before us is actually funded by their healthcare facility or their healthcare program, like a Blue Cross Blue Shield or whomever, because they see, right, obviously, the long-term effects on longevity and healthcare costs. One of the statistics that always stands out so much to me, and this is what I kind of come back to when my numbers people talk about taxes, which is in Albert Lea, after year 1, just the government officials' claims base went down 44%. I mean, what if your local government had 44% more to the bottom line? I mean, that's significant. There is no other suggested or proven item being presented at our state government. I mean, really, so what if 20 of our communities lowered their healthcare costs for all government officials by 40%? What if? And that's what Albert Lee saw. And so I always just kind of remind them, like, look, these results have proven out in multiple communities before us, but we got to buy in all in, right? And the more people you get in that initial committee structure, the easier it is for the local team, right? Built environment.
So is your sole funder Avedis Foundation? And are you structured as a 501c3?
We are not. We are a for-profit company
For-profit company. and
because we
each-
work for ShareCare.
Okay, okay.
Yep.
Gotcha.
Yep. Any other questions on that? Okay. The third policy that we haven't talked a lot about, but is built environment, which actually is one of my favorites because I feel like it really just gets us moving people. And I own a business on one of the main streets in our community. So we have two kind of throughways through our city that run north-south. Harrison, we have Kickapoo. And I have a business on Kickapoo. I have a boutique. And I've been there about 3 years. I bought it right as we were expanding that road from 2.5 lanes to 4. And so, of course, we made it through all of the nightmare of construction to a completed street, and everybody was really excited about, couldn't be more excited about, until now, my business gets absolutely zero frontage exposure because everybody's driving past there 45 miles an hour. Shwoo, shwoo. I get zero walk-in traffic. I get almost no drive-by firsties. Because we built the environment to drive cars through as fast as we could. The businesses around me are going out of business so fast you can't hardly even believe it. So when Dan Burden or the built environment experts come to town, what they do is they put all these key stakeholders on a bicycle and they ride them through your city. And they say, let's watch this, right? And you just kind of look at your city through a cyclist's view. We went to a policy workshop. It took me to Minneapolis. We did the same thing. We rode through Minneapolis, about 15 miles on a bicycle of here's all the ways you can do bike lanes on the right side or the left side or the middle or, you know, whatever it may be, inside protection, outside protection. And really what you learn from it is most of our streets could accommodate bicycle lanes if we're creative. And it's possible. And so in front of my store, not only is it 4 lanes, but each of the lanes is 14 feet, which state law only requires 10. So when you think about it, there was, or I think each of mine are 12, so I ended up with an extra 4 feet on each side. Very easily, you could reprogram it to have bicycle lanes and everybody still travel safely. Who knew, right? Like, who knew? But now all of our key executives, about 50, we had almost 50 people sit in a room with a built environment expert for about 5.5 hours. We learned all about those things. And then you watch them prove out the suggestions they make. But when you think about your community as moving people, not just cars, it increases property values, it increases retail exposure, and I can be a testimony for you because I see it right there on my street. On our main streets, instead of adding that extra lane and letting them drive faster, what we're doing is we're trying to pass a policy around parklets that say, hey, we can apply for a parklet policy, spend a few bucks, and then I can take those 3 parking spaces in front of my shop and turn them into an outdoor park for this event or this weekend or this night. And so what the experts are doing for us is bringing us all of those ideas and all of the support and the research for that, so that my city engineer, who's like, nope, that Broadway, those Broadway people, they didn't want bike lanes when I asked them 6 years ago. Not gonna do that, which is how our meeting started. To now, we're working on it together, right? In the spring, we hope to have a pop-up charrette and set up bike lanes that no major expense from our city. It happens to be a main throughway through the community. It's wide enough that we can take a paint line and draw a bike lane, and we can still have two drive lanes, and one side can still have on-street parking, just not both of them. It's a win. So the committees on the built environment specific to the Marquee project have been doing walking audits to understand how many people are actually parking on the street at night, to understand what do the neighbors really feel, doing the research, the one-on-one and the handshaking, and the how would you feel about, what do you think about, so that then it can be Broadway's idea that comes to the city, not the city's mandate on somebody. And really this whole structure is built about creating buy-in and making it a groundswell. Every idea comes from a groundswell of interest, and then your city commission buys in. Is that helpful on that?
Can I add a couple things?
Yeah.
I mean, I think when I look at built environment, I've been traveling the country the last couple weeks with our expert and really kind of looking at it. And if you think about it, there's a couple things I think are important. In the community in Albert Lee that I talked about earlier, where they widened Main Street where they wanted to and they didn't, instead what they did is they turned that downtown street into having a farmer's market once a week, bringing the community together. They slowed it down. What they ended up finding is investment in that community. For the first time, they had millions of dollars worth of investment in that downtown community. So from a value of bringing in business, it was a huge value for bringing that downtown and making it a stronger downtown where people can show up and walk and everything else. But there's other ways to look at around built environment. I showed earlier the walking path around the lake. How do you create those places that are safe, that are inviting, that are well lit, that invites families and friends to come together to get that little exercise around the lake? To be able to look at parks in your communities, those downtown areas where you're bringing in people to be able to hold a farmer's market at the local park or events in the park. Do you have that space that, again, is bringing the value to the community as well as bringing safety and active transportation and all the other fun stuff? It's more than just bike lanes. There's so many different things that impact how we're building our communities. And it's like what Rachel was saying earlier, it's the WHO's definition. It's the full body. It's not just the absence of disease when it comes to health, but it's mental, it's physical, it's social, it's the whole thing.
Is that helpful? We also see a lot of focus around our parks. Our particular community was very interested in the parks because we have 33 small parks in our city that our city would like to only maintain 3 of them. And so that really opened the doors for passing ordinances around neighborhood use of public parks and giving the neighborhood some rights to kind of own it. And so that also opened some doors. When you think about every community being just a little bit different, what we know is that if a park is actively engaged in doing things, the property values around it can go up as much as 20% if the neighborhoods have buy-in in their local park. And so we're seeing some of those activities around built environment. I will tell you, they're all intertwined, which is really what the magic is, what really makes it work. And when the research supports what it is, it's an easier story to tell. And we go into the economic benefits almost daily, either in a work site. How do I pass this policy that allows, what says, why should I go create a small room in my work site to allow breastfeeding so that mom can come to work sooner? Why would I do that? What is the benefit to me, right? So, but we know that if we'll offer that, we also have a happier employee, we also have full, better life balance, we have increased longevity, right? So it's every aspect, and we're looking at everything. The work sites, the faith-based, everybody's gonna make some investment in that. And so we have that discussion very regularly.
Well, and I think the other piece about it is now think of the collective impact.
Yeah.
Think of a downtown area where the streets are made for people to be able to walk, to shop, to be able to put eyes on the streets, to be able to make it safer, to have restaurants that are promoting health, a little bit healthier. It doesn't have to be vegetarian. It just can promote, make it easier to be able to choose those. Or work sites that are set up around health, or food policies again that support it. to me, the whole life radius model, there is no silver bullet when it comes to health. It's silver buckshot. How do you throw a lot of things out there that give people opportunity to find the ones that work for them?
And then I'm just going to go back to maybe what you heard the very first thing this morning as kind of our wrap up, which is I heard this morning really in the opening keynote or one of the opening presentations, somebody saying, you know, I now have my first grandchild, and I'm not just thinking about me and my next generation, but I'm now for the first time thinking about the third generation from me. The reason that I took the job at Blue Zones Project as the community director is because I own a business in our community, and I mentor young women. I know that that's my calling at this phase in life, is to mentor young women. To mentor women to run the business of themselves. That's what I'm called to do at this point. But what I see in the business that I run is that I am training and I am mentoring just beautiful humans who are going to do great, amazing things with their life. And I want them to do that in Oklahoma. And that's why I'm in Blue Zones Project. Because I can see the full circle of really what it does to that next generation that's choosing where to live first and what to do second. College graduates today are saying, I want to live there and then I'll figure out what I'm going to do. So if we're going to train these young people to be beautiful, brilliant, amazing superhumans, and they're going to choose anywhere in the whole world they want to live, what are we going to do to recruit them to stay here? And we're going to create them an environment where they can make healthy choices, or they won't choose here. And somebody else will be impacting their life. So that's what I would say. It's that serious, but it's also that close to home. Any questions?
I have one more, and I think this one's probably directed for you.
Uh-oh.
I noticed on your map there's concentrations of states that have multiple with blue zones. I
Yeah.
noticed Iowa is very concentrated with blue zones. What's-
So the reason why is we have statewide partners. In Iowa, it was Walmart, the Blue Cross Blue Shield of Iowa. And what we did is we auditioned the communities all around the states, and the top 15 goes to the top. That's same thing in Hawaii. HMSA is our partner. So we have 7 communities down there. And the Cambia Health Foundation in the Oregon Business Council in Oregon, they wanted us to do multiple ones in Oregon. And then in Southwest Florida, we're working with NCH hospital system down there, where he really wants to impact in the same way Michelle and the Venus Foundation does the whole county.
Excellent.
So
So
we
this
have
can
a-
be done on a regional
So
basis.
we have, our goal there is we started with Naples. We're driving Naples, and then you move into those other communities in the same model she was talking about. You get a strong like radius that understands, that gets it, you get champions, you get stories, local stories that you can tell, and then you can bring it out to that next system, and then that next system. So right now, we're moving into Immokalee in Florida, where it's where most of our tomatoes come from. A lot of our immigrant population that really doesn't, the issues around health are very high, so we're going in now kind of looking. And it's different approaches in between. Does that answer your question?
Yes. Thank you.
Have you heard of or connected with an organization called Strong Towns by any chance?
Yes.
They look at a lot of the same things that you do from the perspective of building wealth, I think, or wealthy communities and health. And I know they're based in Minnesota as well, so I didn't know if you had.
I've had some conversations with them where we've been, for the most part, very focused on kind of, for me, I'm like on the road probably about 200 days a year. So it's kind of hard to kind of really kind
So
of.
the guy that runs their organization is on the road about that.
Yeah, he runs it, but it's
He's
a great
out-
organization.
He's out of Brainerd,
Yep,
Minnesota.
that's right.
But the kind of downtowns and the things you're talking about, that's exactly what they
Yes.
advocate. It's because of two things, the amount of wealth that's possible by
Mhm.
concentrating it,
Mhm.
and then the drain on infrastructure when cities are so spread out.
This Joe Menicosi knows him very well, and I'm not thinking of the guy's name. But I was with
Chuck
Joe.
Marone?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was with Joe in Asheville, North Carolina a couple weeks ago. He was telling me that if you look at a downtown area, if you want to bring a Walmart into your community, they end up building this big parking lot, this big infrastructure building. The director of buildings for Walmart said that we build these with a 20-year life cycle. That's all this building's gonna last. In 20 years, we're moving on to the next one. That building, that parking lot is empty and it's there. So if you look at downtown, where you have this strong infrastructure, if you can get them to invest in downtown, for the tax base, for the wealth, you're saying you don't have the urban sprawl, we've got to create more roads and more transportation and all that other stuff to bring it, but you're building that central community, that's where the value is. And that's what he's talking about with strong towns.
Yeah.
And watch the news around the LBJ in Dallas. I mean, right now they're trying to reverse what they've created, which is they've created such a highway system that everybody just keeps driving out farther and farther, and now there's no city, right? And so they're working right now because now the street has gotten so wide that the right side of the street will not cross to the left side. And so one flourishes and one dies. And they've just seen it all the way down the whole highway system. And they're in the process now of trying to figure out how to reverse it.
The part that convinced me, I went to a Strong Towns presentation or conference. Wasn't sure what to expect, but they have a series of articles called the Growth Ponzi Scheme, which
Yeah.
basically communities are paying for current infrastructure with future growth that has to continue forever,
Sure.
or you can't keep paying for
Water,
current
sewage,
infrastructure.
Yeah,
electric,
sure.
all of
Yeah.
that, roads, your road system, it's, yeah.
And it made such financial sense to me, I thought, well, this must be right.
That's it.
I don't know if you mentioned this in your introduction because I had to walk out, but do you have a healthy living program in Shawnee?
We do. We do.
So you're doing so much of the work that we're tasked to do.
Well, that's funny that you say that. We
wanna
work
be in
very,
there.
very closely with
Holly Gordon.
Holly and
Oh, yeah.
the whole Gateway team because we don't have some of the restrictions you have.
Right.
So you may have been in the door. So when we talk about certified healthy schools, basically we take that certified healthy schools, which actually the whole policy was written by Lene Clements, who actually utilized Blue Zones Project as the foundation for that document. So yes, it's very familiar. Basically consider the certified healthy Oklahoma at each pillar and then make it about 20 times harder and more strict and more long-term, and that's today's Blue Zones Project.
Wow.
I follow what you guys are doing on Facebook.
Yeah.
Holly and I are.
Yep.
so-
And I meet with Holly 1 to 3 times a week.
But it's fun to watch
Yeah.
some of the stuff you guys got
Yeah.
going on.
And we work with Lisa Cobb, and we work with, everybody on the whole Gateway team, because we can take your work and build, or we can provide the research you need to get your work checked off. And so it's actually a beautiful partnership.
Yeah.
Mhm. And she's really helped us in tobacco policy around the housing. So, January 1, all of our city housing is curb to curb tobacco free. I mean, that's huge for us. And so now we're working on getting the enforcement component. So we're kind of working together.
I'm interested to see what you guys do, which y'all may already be there, but like when I look at our city, if you look at our city on a map, it's really about 2 miles by 2 miles.
Mhm.
So it's not that big,
Mhm.
but everybody thinks it can't be walked, it can't be biked, it's too big. And how do you get that thinking to start shifting? What's that education component that somehow I'm missing to let them know, yes, we can, it's not that far. So I'm anxious to see some of the stuff that you
Yes.
guys do in that.
We're very fortunate, I believe, in Shawnee that we have so many active cyclists who take their bikes somewhere else, and they would love to cycle here. Our cyclists are not the problem. Our people who ride bikes are not the problem. We just have to convince the drivers to
Yes,
look for them,
exactly.
right? And so, but I tell people, I was living in New York City when they first did the city bikes, You're familiar with the bike share program?
Yes.
So I was there, living there, working with a lot of 20-year-olds at the time. And those 20-year-olds came to the office, and I mean, they are like, this is terrible. Those city bikes, I mean, crashes are up. You know, it is awful. It took about 4.5 months. And once the taxi drivers figured out how to go around cyclists, every one of those 20-year-olds was riding a bike to work. In the city of New York City, it took us about 4.5 months to change the mentality. It won't be overnight, and it may take us a year, but it can be done if you'll just overpopulate it. And you just got to get people on bicycles. And then when they're on bicycles, it'll change. It'll change.
And techniques like she was talking about earlier, the pop-ups.
Yeah.
You know, how much does it cost to paint a lane, you know, for the community? It's not a huge expense to change the lanes, and there's research out there that if a lane is 14 feet wide, they're gonna drive faster because they have a lot more room. But if you lower
For
that
error.
to 10 feet, it slows down traffic just because of the being, you know, I gotta be a little bit more careful as I'm in that lane. So now all of a sudden it's safer to bike because you slow down traffic.
Built environment people have a new term they're using called organized chaos that increases attentiveness. So if you've ever driven in like a foreign country, or if you have to drive on the other side, when you suddenly have to, it's a chaos that's organized, you have to pay a lot more attention. And so they're even doing this in some of the downtowns you may drive in now that have removed the center lane, just to create enough chaos that you have to pay attention. But there's a gazillion things that they're doing around it. But you know, if you want to make some baby steps or whatnot, my card is in the back. Feel free to take it. If you want to bring a constituency from your community to ours and learn about what we're doing, please do. We have Twitter and Facebook and all of the social media handles that you can imagine, and we're readily available. And then we gave these full of some things in our kickoff. So I have 3 recyclable bags that I'm going to give the 3 people who asked questions.
Look at you.
So you can take those home. And thank you guys.
Yeah, and if you want to learn more about bringing Blue Zone Project to your community, I can give you one of my cards as well.
Yeah.